UNK. I want to welcome everybody here on the UNK campus that's in attendance, and I want to give a special welcome to everybody in Facebook world. Thanks for joining us on Facebook Live. The topic of tonight's presentation is this: is there scientific evidence for the existence of God? That's the question and the title of tonight's topic. Now, it's quite common these days to hear claims or read them on the internet that science has killed God. Well, those espousing claims like these hope to communicate one of two things here. Either that science has removed the need for God, or that science has demonstrated the non-existence of God. That is to say, that science has somehow proven that God does not exist. Obviously, those espousing claims like science has killed God would disagree and respond in the negative to the question of tonight's topic: is there scientific evidence for the existence of God? My son is a freshman at Kearney High this year, and a few weeks ago he was having some conversations with a few upperclassmen who were telling him that his beliefs were absurd, that he should not believe that God exists, let alone that Christianity is true. Well, I've told my son to always ask some good questions when people make claims like that. Always ask, why think a thing like that? Well, these young atheists responded with, because science proves atheism. Well, this led to an interesting conversation in which several points were addressed. When engaged in conversations like these, the first thing to do is to properly define and clarify terms. In this case, what is meant by both science and what is meant by God. Let's start with science. Science is commonly understood to be the study of nature. This means that scientists have specific expertise in understanding nature based on observable data through the scientific method. This is the field of a scientist. This is what a scientist does for a living. A chemist, for example, begins to depart their field of expertise when they make claims regarding astronomy. Sorry, Frank. Our local chemist. A scientist is completely out of their field when they comment on issues other than the study of nature. For example, if a scientist starts to comment on literary criticism or art appreciation or politics or ethics or anything that requires an ought or a should, that's just not their field. Anything other than the is of nature is off limits to a scientist. Now, let me clarify. That's not to say that a scientist can't have intelligent opinions or thoughts on these other subjects. Scientists are usually very smart people, and if they put in the time, probably can have intelligent thoughts and opinions on these other subjects. But it's important to note what the letters following their name, that PhD, provides them expertise in which to comment. So simply put, science is the study of nature, and thus a scientist is one who studies nature. With the proper definition of science in mind, now let's talk about God. By definition, if God exists, I don't want to assume anything here, but if God exists, He is the creator of all nature. So, if God does exist and created all nature, it logically follows that God would not be or could not be the kind of thing found in nature. God, by definition, if He exists, must be something other than nature, also known as supernatural. That's just the philosophical term for things other than nature, supernatural. So the one who studies nature, a scientist, is simply in the wrong field if they claim their credentials give them any special authority to speak about the existence or non-existence of God or anything else that's other than nature. You might as well ask a plumber what they think. Sorry, Dawn. She doesn't like when I say that. But it's nothing against plumbers, and it's nothing against scientists. I'm just pointing out the obvious. People with PhDs and any other degree have specialized fields of study, a lane to stay in, so to speak. So we need to stay in our lanes. Richard Dawkins, for example, is a really good biologist. I hope you understand that I respect his work in science. However, he swerves way out of his lane and causes many accidents. He swerves way out of his lane or his field of expertise when he writes books like The God Delusion. It's full of logical errors. He's stepping out of his field of science and discussing philosophical and theological issues that he has no training in. And thus he makes many logical errors in that book. So whether you're a plumber studying the pipes under my sink, or a scientist who's studying physics, chemistry, or biology, it stands to reason that none of these folks should even expect to find anything other than nature, expect to find anything supernatural in the pipes under my sink or when you're in the science lab. They're simply in the wrong field. So, with these clarifications in mind, not only is science the wrong tool for the job, there is zero scientific evidence proving that God does not exist. In fact, that's an impossible task. But what about the question at hand? Is there scientific evidence for the existence of God? Well, to be honest, on the other side of that same scientific coin, the answer is no. There is no scientific data proving the existence of God. But this raises additional questions. What do you mean by evidence? What do you mean by proof? You see, although science is the wrong field to directly prove or disprove the supernatural, science does point to God. Many times, folks, including some scientists I've spoken to, mistakenly conflate evidence with proof. We must not make that mistake. And with that in mind, when it comes to God, science is a pointer, not a prover. The question is raised. Although science cannot prove or disprove the existence of God, well, at least directly, can science point to God indirectly? Can science provide indirect evidence for God's existence? And what is the role of science here? I contend that when we have a proper view of both God and science, then we can clearly see that there is evidence that points to the existence of God. Here's something I like to remind myself of from time to time. Science provides support for premises and philosophical arguments, reaching logical conclusions with supernatural significance or theistic implications. That's a mouthful. Let me say it again. Science provides support for premises and philosophical arguments, reaching logical conclusions with supernatural significance or theistic implications. That simply means that science supports logical arguments for the existence of God. So in that sense, there is scientific evidence for God. In that sense, the answer to tonight's question is a resounding yes. It's not proof, but evidence that points to God. Let's discuss one of my favorite logical arguments, the Kalam cosmological argument. It's two simple steps that reach a logically deductive conclusion. So in a deductive argument, if the two premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. It will follow like mathematics. Consider these two steps reaching a deductive conclusion. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe, all nature, began to exist. 3, conclusion, therefore, the universe, all nature, has a cause. Now, I've explained and defended the Kalam at length on my website at freethinkingministries.com. So I encourage you to click around there on the website if you'd like to delve deeper into this argument. But for my purposes tonight, I simply want to point out that science supports those two premises, premise 1 and premise 2 of the Kalam cosmological argument. These two premises, if true, deductively conclude that, that they reach a conclusion with theistic implications. Let's just say that. So that is to say that in this sense, science points to God. Now it's important to note that we can reach these conclusions without touching a Bible. Does anybody see a Bible even close to me right now? I intentionally did not even bring it because I did not want to be accused of circular reasoning, appealing to Bible verses to try to prove the God of the Bible or anything like that. You can call me a bad Christian for not bringing it. But my point is that I am not touching or referencing a Bible tonight to make my case. I contend that simply by thinking logically about scientific data, we can rationally infer the existence of God. Consider how science supports the first premise of the Kalam. Science has always shown us that if something begins to exist, then something caused it to come into existence. That is to say, as I explained to my son several years ago when he was still quite young, if something has a birthday, then it's got parents. In fact, isn't that what the entire enterprise of science is all about? Cause and effect? I mean, science assumes the law of causality. For example, the decay of uranium causes lead to come into existence. Freezing temperatures cause ice to begin existing, and your parents, well, they caused you to exist, but we don't like to think about that. But so clearly, science supports the first premise of the Kalam. But what about the second step? Does science support premise 2 of the Kalam cosmological argument? Now, when I've had debates online with atheists, I like to support this step of the Kalam argument with logic alone. I'm not a scientist. And so I like to stay in my lane, what I've had graduate courses in logic. So I like to defend premise 2 with logic alone. With that said, however, when I talk to scientists, my scientific friends over here, they provide data that supports the second premise of the Kalam. For example, the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, Big Bang cosmology. All of this is scientific evidence that would support the statement that the universe began to exist. If that's not enough, 3 of the leading physicists in the world today, Arvin Bohr, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, constructed a theorem known as the BGV theorem, or Bohr, Guth, and Vilenkin, the BGV theorem of 2003. Their theorem reaches the same conclusion. All nature had an absolute beginning. Now keep in mind that these scientists, they're not Christians. They don't have any theological axe to grind. They're simply doing science. In fact, I get the sense that at least a couple of them don't like their conclusion. They kind of wish it wasn't true, but they're honest. And they say, these are our conclusions. Dr. Guth, the G in BGV, he noted that even if there were such a thing as a multiverse, many different universes, that there would still be a mother of all beginnings. And he said, even within the context of inflation, there would still be somewhere an ultimate beginning. Dr. Vilenkin, the V in the BGV, makes the point even stronger. He says, and I quote, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning." End quote. Why does Vilenkin call this a problem? Why is this a problem for scientists? Because this is scientific proof, that's the word that Vilenkin uses. This is scientific proof, according to Vilenkin, that this is where science stops. Accordingly, there simply cannot be a scientific or a natural explanation for the beginning of the universe or all nature. Science cannot explain what caused the universe. But logical thinking can finish the job. This is what we call metaphysics, or simply beyond physics. Now, it's logically incoherent. That is, it makes no sense to say nature existed before all nature existed, or nature existed before nature began to exist. That doesn't make any sense. So, if nature began to exist, it follows that something that is not nature caused nature. Therefore, the cause of all nature, what we mean by the universe, must be something other than nature. Again, that's simply what philosophers mean by supernatural. So from this it follows that the cause of the universe must possess certain properties. Let's think about it. The cause of the universe, all nature, must be something other than nature. So by thinking logically about science, we can conclude that the cause of the universe is a supernatural cause of the universe. That follows just thinking things through logically. So if nature began to exist, we've got a supernatural cause. The universe is everything in time and space, the space-time universe. So if space began to exist, then it follows that the cause of space must be spaceless. But it follows that if the cause is spaceless, then it's also immaterial, because matter requires space to exist. Matter can't exist if space does not exist. So we can see that this cause of the universe must be immaterial. Well, another word for that is spirit. No Bible up here. Just want to make that clear. We're talking about the space-time universe. So if the space-time universe began to exist, the cause of time had to be timeless. Whatever it was timeless, without beginning. Because beginnings require time to already be in effect. Another word for that is eternal. Eternal without beginning. And if something does not have a beginning, well then whatever caused the universe had to be uncaused. Because if something does not begin to exist, then something cannot cause it to begin existing. So whatever the cause of the universe was, it was uncaused. It was timeless, without beginning, eternal. Again, that word eternal might sound biblical, but have I referenced any Bible verses or touched any Bible? No. Whatever the cause of the universe was, it was extremely powerful. In fact, I can't think of anything that requires more power than causing an entire universe to come into existence out of nothing. And since apart from time and space, things don't happen, well, on my website, I've made the case in depth and detail that the cause of the universe, whatever you want to call it, must also be a mind or a thinking thing with free will. If you'd like to ask me questions on that, we can get into that in the Q&A. But since only persons fit that category, we have good reason to think that the cause of the universe is a personal being. Because only persons are the kinds of things that have minds who are free to think and act. If those things exist at all, it would be a person, a personal thing. Well, let me survey the crowd here on the UNK campus and show me, by way of raising your hands, how many of you consider yourself to be a person? Raise your hand for me. One? Okay, we had one holdout, but finally all the hands went up. Everybody here considers themselves to be a person. And I bet if you're watching in Facebook land, you probably consider yourself to be a person as well. Well, that leads us to another deductive argument with two steps leading to one conclusion. Premise one: persons can have personal relationships with other personal beings. Premise two: the cause of the universe is a personal being. I just made that case. Conclusion: therefore, it's possible that you can have if you're a person, it's possible that you can have a personal relationship with the cause of the universe. Again, I have not touched a Bible. I haven't quoted any Bible verses or referenced any spiritual book whatsoever. I've simply noted that if we think logically about the scientific data, we can rationally infer or conclude that it's at least possible for every person to have a personal relationship with the cause of the universe. Although, to this point, I have not even touched the Bible to make the case that it's possible to have a personal relationship with the cause of the universe, I will note that the Bible does say the exact same thing. In fact, not only does the Bible tell us that it's possible for you to have a personal relationship with the cause of the universe, it tells you exactly how to have a personal relationship with the cause of the universe through Jesus Christ. Perhaps we should take the Bible seriously. Jesus said, I'm going to touch the Bible now. Well, I've got it up here. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father, the cause of the universe, but through me. John 14:6. Thank you.